Commander Vex adjusted his ceremonial rescue badges for the third time in 5 minutes, which was really saying something considering his species only had 2 fingers per hand. The Galactic Council's finest emergency response team stood at attention in the pristine briefing room, their various alien forms creating what could generously be called an impressive display of interspecies cooperation. Or what could more accurately be called a cosmic joke waiting to happen. "Gentle beings," Vex announced with the kind of authority that came from successfully rescuing lost tourists from 17 different garden worlds. "Today we face our most challenging mission yet. We must extract one Jake Martinez, human male, age 32, from the surface of Kepler 442b. Dr. Claxon, the team's chief medical officer and resident expert on fragile species biology, raised what might have been a tentacle. "Sir, according to my databases, humans require very specific atmospheric conditions to survive. Oxygen levels between 19 and 23%, temperature ranges that don't immediately boil their internal fluids, and protection from most forms of radiation that the rest of us consider mildly refreshing." "Exactly why this is such a critical rescue," Vex replied, puffing up his chest sacs with pride. "The poor creature has been stranded for over 72 hours. At this point, we're probably looking at a recovery mission rather than a rescue." Pilot Zorb, whose nervous system was so highly evolved that he could detect danger from 3 star systems away, was already twitching. "Commander, perhaps we should review the planetary data one more time. Kepler 442b has been classified as a Class 12 death world. The atmospheric composition alone would dissolve most carbon-based life forms in minutes. Which is precisely why humans shouldn't be doing survey work in the first place," Vex said dismissively. "Leave the dangerous jobs to species that actually evolved for them. We'll be in and out in 6 hours, maximum." The human probably managed to activate his emergency shelter and is huddled inside, slowly dying of terror and malnutrition. The team nodded in agreement. After all, humans were notorious throughout the galaxy for being absurdly fragile. They needed to sleep for 8 hours every rotation, required constant hydration, with a liquid that literally fell from the sky on their homeworld, and couldn't even photosynthesize their own nutrients. The fact that they'd managed to achieve space travel at all was considered one of the galaxy's most amusing accidents. "Remember," Vex continued, "we're dealing with a primitive survival instinct coupled with a complete inability to adapt to hostile environments. The human will likely be in a state of advanced panic. Dr. Claxon, have the sedatives ready. We don't want him injuring himself during the extraction." Dr. Claxon began mixing a cocktail of mild relaxants that worked on most mammalian species. "Should I prepare the trauma counseling protocols as well?" "Absolutely. Poor creature probably hasn't stopped screaming since the crash." 6 hours later, Commander Vex was beginning to understand why Kepler 442b had earned its reputation as a Class 12 death world, and why his species had evolved fear responses in the first place. The moment their rescue shuttle broke through the planet's atmosphere, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and then invited its friends to join the party. The acid rain immediately began eating through their hull's protective coating with the enthusiasm of a starving Zephyrian at an all-you-can-dissolve buffet. "Pilot Zorb," Vex called out, his voice admirably steady despite the fact that his environmental suit was already beeping warnings in 17 different languages. "Please tell me those readings are incorrect." "I wish I could, sir," Zorb replied, his voice climbing 3 octaves higher than usual. "But according to our sensors, the atmospheric pressure is currently trying to compress us into decorative paperweights. The ambient radiation levels would make a nuclear reactor blush, and the local flora appears to be carnivorous. All of it." Through the shuttle's reinforced viewport, the landscape looked like someone had asked a committee of sadistic gods to design the perfect nightmare vacation destination. Purple vegetation writhed in the toxic wind, reaching toward their ship with what could generously be called curiosity, and, more accurately, be called homicidal intent. Dr. Claxon was frantically adjusting his scanner readings. "Commander, I'm detecting organic compounds that shouldn't exist in nature, geological formations that appear to be actively hostile, and weather patterns that seem to violate at least 3 fundamental laws of physics. And somewhere in this delightful paradise," Vex muttered, "we're supposed to find one terrified human." They found Jake's crashed shuttle 47 minutes later, embedded nose first into what appeared to be a cliff face made entirely of crystallized poison. The impact crater suggested he'd hit the surface at roughly the same velocity as a small meteor, which should have resulted in what their textbooks politely termed immediate biological reorganization. "Life signs?" Vex asked, though he was already mentally composing the unfortunate accident report. None detected in the immediate area, Dr. Claxon replied, though to be fair, our sensors are having trouble distinguishing between background radiation, atmospheric interference, and that singing sound the rocks keep making. The rocks are singing. Apparently it's how they attract prey. 12 hours into their search, the rescue team had managed to lose 2 sensor drones to aggressive plant life, nearly fell into 3 different types of quicksand that seemed to actively hunt in packs, and discovered that the local water supply was more accurately described as liquid industrial accident. Perhaps, suggested Pilot Zorb during their 3rd emergency retreat to the shuttle, the human managed to activate his distress beacon and was picked up by a passing ship. On a Class 12 death world? Vex scoffed. What kind of captain would be insane enough to enter this system voluntarily? By day 2, Commander Vex had reached what military strategists politely called a tactical reassessment of mission parameters, and what everyone else called blind panic mixed with the desperate need to flee screaming into space. The rescue team's 2nd day on Kepler 422b had started badly and gone rapidly downhill from there. Dr. Claxon had nearly been devoured by what appeared to be a flower, if flowers typically had 17 rows of rotating teeth and an attitude problem. Pilot Zorb had fallen into a pool of what they'd initially mistaken for water, but turned out to be some kind of sentient digestive fluid that had actually tried to negotiate for better eating conditions. And those were the good parts of their day. "Sir," Dr. Claxon reported, his voice muffled by the emergency medical foam currently sealing 3 different acid burns on his face, "I've run every possible scan in a 50-kilometer radius. There's no trace of human biological material anywhere." "Define no trace," Vex said, though he was already mentally preparing his incident report, specifically the part where he explained how they'd managed to lose an entire rescue team to a planet that was essentially a cosmic practical joke. "I mean, the molecular scanners aren't detecting so much as a single human cell. Either Jake Martinez was completely vaporized on impact, which seems likely, given the crater's size, or..." Dr. Claxon paused, checking his readings again. "Actually, there's no or. Complete molecular dissolution is the only logical explanation." Pilot Zorb, who had spent the last 6 hours running continuous system diagnostics on their shuttle while making small, whimpering sounds, looked up from his console. "Commander, I hate to interrupt what I'm sure is a very important discussion about theoretical human remains, but our hull integrity is down to 67%, our air recycling system is asking for hazard pay, and something outside just tried to cord our landing gear." Through the shuttle's viewport, they could see one of the planet's larger predators circling their ship with what could only be described as romantic interest. It was the size of a small building, had more teeth than a tax audit, and appeared to be leaving what their xenobiology training optimistically called courtship gifts around their landing site. "The gifts appear to be the dissolved remains of previous suitors," Dr. Claxon added helpfully. Commander Vex made the kind of decision that had kept his species alive for 3 million years of evolution. "Gentle beings, I'm calling it. Jake Martinez is gone, vaporized, dissolved, or otherwise converted into component atoms by this nightmare planet. We've done everything possible, within the bounds of sanity and basic survival instinct." "So we're retreating?" Pilot Zorb asked, hope creeping into his voice for the first time in 48 hours. "We're conducting a strategic withdrawal to prevent additional casualties," Vex corrected. "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" Dr. Claxon asked. "The difference is that strategic withdrawals look better in official reports and don't require as much paperwork." As their shuttle lifted off from Kepler 442b's surface, Commander Vex began composing his incident report. Human engineer Jake Martinez, lost to hostile environment, presumed deceased due to complete molecular dissolution. Recommendation: reclassify humans as unsuitable for survey work on any planet more dangerous than a botanical garden, preferably one with safety railings. 3 weeks later, Commander Vex was enjoying what he'd convinced himself was a well-deserved coffee break in the Galactic Council Space Station's cafeteria, trying not to think about the 17 different forms he'd had to fill out explaining how they'd managed to lose a human to a planet that was essentially a cosmic horror story with weather. The morning had been blissfully routine. No emergency calls, no death worlds, no carnivorous flowers trying to flirt with their equipment. Just the peaceful hum of a space station where the most dangerous thing was the risk of getting food poisoning from the Andromedan sushi bar. Which is why, when Jake Martinez walked through the cafeteria doors, looking like he'd just returned from a pleasant hiking trip instead of being molecularly dissolved by a nightmare planet, Vex's first instinct was to check if someone had slipped hallucinogens into the station's air supply. "Hey there, Commander!" Jake called out cheerfully, waving with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for reuniting with old friends, rather than people who'd given up searching for your corpse. "Thanks for stopping by, Kepler 442b. Sorry I missed you guys." Behind Jake, what appeared to be 3 of the planet's most lethal predators trotted along like the world's most terrifying golden retrievers. The largest one, which Vex distinctly remembered from their planetary briefings as a Class A apex predator, capable of dissolving starship hulls with its digestive enzymes, was wearing what looked suspiciously like a collar made of braided, toxic vines. "You," Vex managed, his vocal cords apparently having decided to go on strike. "You're supposed to be dead." "Dead?" Jake laughed, the sound echoing off the cafeteria walls and causing several nearby aliens to drop their meals in shock. "Why would I be dead? Kepler 442b is beautiful this time of year. Well, it's beautiful all the time, really, but the acid rain season has this lovely prismatic effect when it hits the crystalline formations." Dr. Claxon, who had been peacefully analyzing what he'd thought was a particularly interesting strain of space mold, nearly fell off his chair. "Jake Martinez? But our molecular scanners showed complete biological dissolution. You can't be here. It's physically impossible." "Oh, you mean Bessie here?" Jake reached over to scratch behind what might have been ears on the building-sized creature that had been cording their landing gear. The beast made a sound like a contented volcano and leaned into the scratching. "She's actually really sweet once you get to know her. Turns out the whole territorial aggression thing was just because she was lonely. Haven't you ever had a pet that got a little overexcited when strangers visited?" "That," Pilot Zorb whispered, pointing at the creature with a trembling finger, "that thing tried to eat our shuttle." "She was bringing you gifts," Jake protested. "It's how her species shows affection. The dissolved organic matter was her way of saying welcome to the neighborhood. I tried to explain that most galactic species prefer flowers, or maybe a nice bottle of wine, but she's traditional." The second creature, which looked like someone had crossbred a shark with a tornado and given it anger management issues, nuzzled against Jake's shoulder with enough force to pulverize concrete. Jake absent-mindedly fed it what appeared to be a chunk of the same crystallized poison that had nearly killed their shuttle. "And this is Rex," Jake continued conversationally. "He's still a little shy around new people, but he makes excellent conversation once you learn his language. Did you know that his species communicates through controlled seismic vibrations? They're natural poets." "Jake," Dr. Claxon said slowly, his medical training warring with everything he was currently witnessing, "the atmospheric composition of that planet should have killed you in minutes. The radiation alone exceeds lethal dosages by a factor of 12. "Oh, that," Jake shrugged. "Yeah, it took a little getting used to. The first few days were rough, I'll admit, but you know how it is with humans and adaptation. Give us a week and we'll figure out how to make friends with just about anything." Commander Vex was starting to suspect that either he was having a very elaborate hallucination, or the universe had developed a sense of humor and decided to test it on him personally. "Jake, we found your crashed shuttle. The impact crater suggested immediate fatalities." "The shuttle crash? Yeah, that was a bit of a rough landing," Jake admitted. "But the impact foam worked great. I walked away with just a few bruises and a mild headache, though I did lose most of my emergency supplies in the fire." "So you survived on a Class 12 death world with no supplies," Vex said flatly. "Well, I had my multi-tool and my engineering training," Jake replied as if this explained everything. "And honestly, once you filter out the more aggressive acids, the rainwater is perfectly drinkable. Tastes a bit like lemon-flavored battery acid, but you get used to it. And the local fruit is actually pretty nutritious once you build up an immunity to the neurotoxins." The third creature, which resembled a cross between a spider and a small moon, chittered something in what sounded like mathematical equations set to music. "Luna says you guys seemed really stressed when you visited," Jake translated. "She wanted to invite you back for dinner, but I explained that most species require specific atmospheric conditions for optimal social interaction." Admiral Thorne arrived in the cafeteria 17 minutes later, drawn by reports of either a miraculous resurrection or a complete breakdown of reality as they understood it. She took one look at Jake Martinez casually sharing his lunch with 3 Class A predators and immediately regretted every career decision that had led to this moment. "Engineer Martinez," she said carefully, using the tone typically reserved for defusing bombs or negotiating with cosmic entities, "perhaps you could walk us through exactly how you survived on Kepler 4042b for 3 weeks. "Oh, absolutely," Jake said with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just been asked about their favorite hobby instead of their impossible survival on a planet that could kill gods. "So first thing after the crash, I assessed my situation. Broken shuttle, no communications, hostile environment, limited supplies. Standard survival protocol. Really? Standard survival protocol, Dr. Claxon repeated, weakly. Right. So step 1 was securing water. The acid rain was obviously problematic, but if you run it through a basic filtration system, it's actually perfectly safe. I used my shirt as a cloth filter, added some crushed limestone from the canyon walls to neutralize the stronger acids, and let it settle overnight. Tasted like angry lemonade, but hydration is hydration. Vex was frantically taking notes, though he wasn't entirely sure why. You drank acid rain. Filtered acid rain, Jake corrected. I'm not crazy, and after about a week I didn't even need the limestone anymore. Human digestive systems are pretty adaptable once you give them a chance to adjust. Now I actually prefer it to regular water. Regular water tastes boring. Bessie made a rumbling sound that shook the floor plating. Jake scratched her chin affectionately. Bessie agrees. She thinks most species are too picky about their fluids. Admiral Thorne was beginning to understand why humans had been flagged in the galactic database as a species of interest. And food? That was trickier at first, Jake admitted. Most of the local vegetation is technically poisonous, but poison is really just a matter of dosage and tolerance. I started with tiny amounts of the less aggressive plants. You know, the ones that only caused mild hallucinations instead of immediate organ failure. You deliberately poisoned yourself? Dr. Claxon said, his medical training screaming in languages that hadn't been invented yet. I built up immunity, Jake corrected cheerfully. It's called mithritisms. Humans have been doing it for centuries. By week 2, I could eat pretty much anything on the planet. The blue fruits that look like angry crystals are actually delicious, once your nervous system stops interpreting their neurotoxins as pain signals. Rex, the shark tornado creature, made a series of grinding sounds that caused the cafeteria's structural supports to vibrate sympathetically. Rex says the blue fruits are his favorite too, Jake translated. We used to have picnics together in the Screaming Valleys. That's what I called them anyway. The locals call them the meditation canyons, because the constant sonic assault helps with deep thinking. Sonic assault, Admiral Thorne repeated. It's only assault if you fight it, Jake explained. If you lean into it and let the sound waves recalibrate your inner ear, it's actually quite relaxing. I got some of my best engineering work done there. Speaking of which, I figured out how to hotwire Kepler 442b's magnetic field to boost communication signals. Did you know that planet has a natural amplification system built into its core? You hotwired a planet, Vex said, his pen hovering uselessly over his notepad. Just the magnetic field. And technically it was more like rerouting than hotwiring. Engineering is engineering, whether you're working on a starship or a planetary system. Though I'll admit the planet's operating manual is written in geological formations and seismic patterns, which took some getting used to. Luna, the spider-moon mathematician, began what could only be described as calculating something in mid-air, using her legs, to trace complex equations that hurt to look at directly. Luna's working out the probability matrices for our successful retrieval mission, Jake translated. She's fascinated by the statistical anomaly of a rescue team abandoning a search after only 2 days. According to her calculations, the optimal search duration for a Class 12 environment should be approximately -7 hours. -7 hours, Admiral Thorne asked. That's how long before arriving that most rational species would decide not to attempt the mission in the first place, Jake explained. Luna thinks it's hilarious that you actually landed. She's been laughing about it for weeks. The mathematical spider has been laughing at us, Dr. Claxon said, to no one in particular. Oh, Luna's not just mathematical, Jake corrected. She's also a philosopher, a geologist, and she makes excellent tea from the local flora. Her dissertation on the intersection of quantum mechanics and intentional ecosystem design is absolutely fascinating. Did you know this entire planet is actually a carefully balanced biological computer? Commander Vex looked at his rescue team, then at Jake, then at the 3 creatures that had apparently adopted a human as their pet project, then back at his notepad, where he'd written, "Humans drink acid rain," followed by several question marks and what might have been a small nervous breakdown rendered in ink. Jake, he said finally, when you say the planet is a biological computer, what exactly do you mean? Oh, that's the really cool part, Jake said, his eyes lighting up with the kind of enthusiasm that made Admiral Thorne seriously consider updating the human species classification from harmless to potentially concerning. You see, Jake continued, blissfully unaware that he was fundamentally restructuring the Galactic Council's understanding of reality. Kepler 4042b isn't actually a death world. It's more like a really advanced screening process. The planet tests visitors to see if they're worth talking to. Admiral Thorne felt a migraine forming in parts of her brain she didn't know existed. Screening process. Right. The acid rain checks chemical tolerance, the predators test social adaptability, the toxic atmosphere measures respiratory flexibility, and the seismic activity evaluates communication skills. It's actually a really elegant system once you understand the underlying logic. Bessie nodded sagely, which was disturbing on multiple levels, since no one had previously known that building-sized predators could express philosophical agreement. The planet's inhabitants have been running this screening process for about 12,000 years, Jake explained. They're looking for species that can think beyond immediate survival and see the bigger picture. Most visitors either die immediately or flee in panic, which tells them everything they need to know. And humans? Commander Vex asked, though he was increasingly certain he didn't want to know the answer. Oh, humans are apparently the first species to not only survive the screening but actually improve the planet's infrastructure while we were there, Jake said proudly. I helped optimize their atmospheric recycling system, upgraded their seismic communication network, and taught them some basic engineering principles they'd never considered. You taught a planet engineering, Dr. Claxon said flatly. Well, technically I taught Luna and her colleagues. They're the ones who manage the planetary systems. Turns out they'd been having efficiency problems for centuries but couldn't figure out how to implement mechanical solutions to biological processes. Humans are apparently really good at that kind of hybrid thinking. Rex made a series of sounds that could charitably be described as mechanical laughter and uncharitably be described as the noise a starship makes when it's exploding in slow motion. Rex thinks it's hilarious that the Galactic Council classified Kepler 442b as uninhabitable, Jake translated. It's actually one of the most sophisticated civilizations in this sector. They just don't advertise because they prefer to avoid what Luna calls tourist contamination. Admiral Thorne realized she was going to need a lot more coffee and possibly a career change. Engineer Martinez, are you telling me that you've established first contact with a previously unknown civilization that uses an entire planet as a screening process? First official contact, yeah, Jake confirmed. Though Luna says they've been observing galactic civilization for millennia, they have some fascinating insights into interspecies politics. Did you know that 73% of galactic conflicts could be resolved through better engineering and improved snack distribution? Snack distribution, Vex repeated, his pen having given up entirely and started writing things like, "Help me," in the margins. Food security is the foundation of social stability, Jake explained as if this was obvious. Luna's people figured that out ages ago. That's why their screening process includes the dietary adaptation phase. Species that can't adjust their nutritional requirements aren't ready for the kind of cooperative engineering projects they're interested in. Commander Vex looked at Admiral Thorne. Admiral Thorne looked at Dr. Claxon. Dr. Claxon looked at his medical scanner, which was currently displaying readings that suggested Jake Martinez was somehow healthier now than he'd been before crashing on a death world. Engineer Martinez, Admiral Thorne said carefully. What exactly are these cooperative engineering projects? Jake's grin widened to proportions that should have been anatomically impossible. Oh, that's the really exciting part. They're building a galaxy-wide environmental management system. Think terraforming, but on a cosmic scale. They want to optimize atmospheric conditions, gravitational stability, and resource distribution across multiple star systems. They want to renovate the galaxy, Vex said weakly. Renovate, optimize, and generally spruce things up, Jake confirmed. Luna says most species are living in what amounts to galactic slums, when they could be enjoying premium cosmic real estate with just a little applied engineering. Bessie made a sound like contented thunder and began grooming one of her smaller appendages. Bessie's excited because she's been selected as the project coordinator for our local stellar neighborhood, Jake translated. Turns out her species are natural habitat designers. They've been wanting to do something about the poorly distributed asteroid belts and inefficient planetary orbits in this system for ages. Our stellar neighborhood is going to be renovated by a creature that tried to digest our landing gear, Dr. Claxon observed. She was just being friendly, Jake protested, and she has excellent taste in spatial organization. You should see her portfolio of successful habitat redesigns. Admiral Thorne made a decision that would later be remembered as either brilliant foresight or catastrophic administrative failure. Engineer Martinez, I'm promoting you to Senior Xenological Engineering Specialist and assigning you as our official liaison to the Kepler 442b civilization. Awesome, Jake said. Luna mentioned they've got 3 more planets that need assessment teams. Apparently there's this really interesting world in the Proxima system that's been classified as uninhabitable, but they think it might just need some creative interpretation of the local hazards. Creative interpretation of local hazards, Commander Vex muttered, frantically updating his incident reports to include a new category for humans who befriend death worlds. When do we leave? Jake asked eagerly. Admiral Thorne repeated. Well, Bessie, Rex, and Luna want to come along to help with the assessment. They're really excited about meeting more galactic species and sharing their infrastructure optimization techniques. Plus, Rex has been working on some new communication protocols he wants to field test. As if on cue, Rex made a sound that caused every piece of electronic equipment in the cafeteria to briefly achieve sentience and file a complaint with the station's maintenance department. Admiral Thorne looked at her coffee cup, which was now softly humming what sounded like a lullaby. She looked at Jake Martinez, who was casually petting creatures that could redesign solar systems. She looked at Commander Vex, whose incident report had evolved into what appeared to be either abstract art or a cry for help. Engineer Martinez, she said finally, report to Docking Bay 7 at 0800 hours. And Martinez? Yes, Admiral. Next time you crash land on a death world, maybe send a postcard.